Good morning. Welcome back, everybody, to the third and final day of the Community Forum. Today is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to wrap with our final couple of panels and then shift into celebrating accomplishments of our graduates. If you're new here, my name is Micah Russell. I'm the interim dean of the Clark Family School of Environment and Sustainability and also the MEM director. And I just want to take a few moments to kick off our Friday together and then offer a special tribute as well. But first, as we get started, I need to pause and recognize the hard work of our Clark School team. Every member of the faculty and staff has been working double time this last month to help our graduates get ready to finish, and for those that are in their second year, and to help our first year students begin to dream and visualize and identify their project work as they move into their second year. So it's a very busy time of year. And furthermore, there are some of those folks who are also engaged in setting up a series of special events, including this forum and the party that we'll be having later this afternoon. So I want to give a special shout out to those folks who have been working behind the scenes to make this forum and our celebrations possible. So I'll start with our incredible staff, Julian and Lindsay, if you would stand and receive some applause, please. And I'll invite Rebecca also. Rebecca is a new staff member and quickly becoming an indispensable part of our team. And finally, coordinating 694, which of course is the project implementation final phase of the MEM push, Dr. Ricardo Vasquez-Perales. Thank you to all of you for endeavoring to make this a really rewarding and satisfying final week. Really appreciate it. So from here, I'd like to move into a short reflection on something special that'll be happening tomorrow. Some of you remember Arlo Lott. He was in the MEM program and tragically died in a climbing accident just short of finishing his degree 2 years ago. Arlo came to us as a first-generation college student. He came to us from a ranching background, an active ranching life, and we really valued his rural, traditional perspective. It was a really essential part of the conversations we were having at that time around the intersection of agriculture and environmentalism. And furthermore, he was just a delightful human being and was a very compassionate soul who supported the students around him, supported his family network and his community. And he was so humble. In fact, there were members of his circle that didn't even realize he was working on a master's degree. But it was important to him as an individual to really live out his values. And I tell you what, I really treasure my time with Arlo, as I know our whole team does. Tomorrow, we have the special privilege of providing Arlo and his family a posthumous degree. So his MEM degree will be awarded, and it'll be given to his daughter. And furthermore, 11 members of his family will be in attendance. So this is a really big deal for the Lott clan. And if you're able to attend graduation tomorrow and congratulate that family and share in some of that love for Arlo, especially if you had some experiences with Arlo during his time here, I would really encourage you to do so. Even if you're not able to attend but would like to see the graduation ceremony remotely, remember that there is a virtual option. So that's all I'm going to say for now, because we will definitely highlight Arlo's contributions to our Western community during graduation tomorrow. But I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that that very special dimension of our celebration will be happening tomorrow. So with that, we're going to take just a few minutes to transition and be sure that we're ready to start our first panel at 10 o'clock. Thank you all again for being here a little bit early today for these announcements, and I can't wait to see you as we celebrate over at the Clark School later this afternoon. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. This is our final day of the community forum. And I want to mention that this group has a panel titled Proactively Pursuing Transparency and Education for the Built Environment. They are Donny Davol, Aleksandra Kostick, and Paige Kempker. And before we start the panel with their presentations, with their introduction, I want to remind our audience, also those on Zoom, that they will begin with a 5 minutes introduction of their panel, and then each of them will have 13 minutes to present the project, 2 minutes for Q&A personally, and then the next panelist. At the end, we will have a 10 minutes time for Q&A for all panelists. Q&A will be done through the Slido app that you have there in the chairs are there. So the QR code is ready for you. And without saying any more, I want to give them an applause for welcoming for this panel. Yeah.
Hello, good morning. Thanks again for all of you joining us today on our third and final day of these forum presentations. Kind of on top of what Micah started with, I also just want to say how important I think it is that we have forums like this, where we can all get together and share ideas and challenges, and hopefully some potential solutions that we can have for all the issues that we're facing in our world these days. So special thanks to all of you in the audience and on Zoom who've really spent these times coming and joining and supporting all of us up here and all of our hard work that we've really done the last year, 2 years. So thank you. All right. So to start off our actual introduction, we're going to ask a series of questions. And so you can gauge your responses by raising your hand. If you don't know the answer or don't really agree with the question, don't do anything. If you kind of have an idea of what we're talking about or agree with, you can raise it a little bit. The more you know, the higher you raise it. If you really agree and really like the question and think it's a great thing we should be doing, go ahead and jump up and down and show some enthusiasm, make a little bit of noise. It'll be a lot of fun that way. Okay, first question. How many of you think you could ballpark the environmental impact of the energy that's required to sustain our daily lives? Yeah. How many of you think you could describe the environmental impact of the materials that it takes to build our buildings and homes that we live and work in? Maybe. What about the impact of all of our household waste that what happens to it after it leaves our curb? Got one. Good. Few. Some. Great. To be honest, those are very hard, difficult, challenging questions. So it's okay if it's a little unknown. One more question. How many of you are curious? I thought I'd see a little more noise from that, but at least we got a lot of big hands. So that's great. We're all definitely curious too, and we hope to shed some light on those first few questions that we asked through our presentations and the work we've done. One way we do that is through life cycle assessments. LCAs provide us an ability to quantify the impacts between humans and the environment. It encourages us to do this through a systems perspective. I think we all know we're pretty interconnected to the world around us. It's so easy to get kind of focused on our daily lives, just trying to get through those tasks that we need to do, that it's easy to forget how our decisions really affect the world that we're so dependent for our survival.
Thanks, Donny. The built environment refers to human-made conditions, which includes the buildings we live in, the distribution systems that provide us with water and electricity, the transportation systems that we use to travel place to place, and the waste management systems that handle materials end of life. These modified structures provide people with living, working, and recreational spaces. And through our projects, we hope that this information can be distributed through the community to encourage climate action and resource awareness.
Now, while the waste sector tends to be less impactful than the building and energy sectors, contributing less than 10% of emissions globally, waste reduction is one of the easiest climate actions for the community to get involved in. So waste reduction at an individual level makes climate action possible at every level. So our panel looks forward to displaying how the three of us used quantitative assessment to inform community engagement and outreach in climate action within the built environment. And I'll hand it over to Donny.
All right. So my project was a life cycle assessment comparison of 5 of the Habitat for Humanity homes in the Gunnison Valley. To kind of set the stage, I just wanted to kind of take a step back and talk about why this work is important. And so let's look a little at energy. So this image is called a Sankey diagram. I think it's one of the coolest images that came out a few years ago. You look at the top and you're probably like, what's a quad? It's pretty difficult, right? So one way to think about it is 1 quad is equal to 3.6 million dump trucks of coal. These dump trucks are 20,000 pounds, what you see carrying the big, the snow, gravel around up and down through the valley. So on the left side of this graph, you see different forms of energy sources and how much of it's required. The size of the line shows how much of it's used and breaks down into different energy sectors and what we can use. And actually, I think a major part of this is just noting what we get rejected. So this is lost energy in forms of inefficiencies, heat loss, noise, vibration, things we can't actually capture, but we have to produce just to get what we want out of it from the end. So just estimating, about 100 quads is equal to about 360 million dump truck coals a year. And from a world scale, that's equal to about 580 quads, which is 2 billion dump truck loads of coal. So just kind of think about that. There's a lot of coal going on in the world, dump truck wise. This graph shows the increase of energy that we've needed since 1800. Some major things here is that since 1920, we've used 10 times more energy than we did then. And since 1980, about here, we've used double that. So every year, along with population increase, we just keep using more and more energy to sustain the lives we are having. Taking a look at the construction industry in particular, 27% of the global greenhouse emissions come from the operations of buildings, running our lights, our computers, heating, cooling systems, charging computers, all that fun stuff, but we've gotten so used to just plugging in and not thinking about. 6% of those emissions come from the actual materials that it takes to construct these buildings. Another 7% is kind of infrastructure, roads, pipelines, all that extra stuff that we just need to kind of help our environment run. Interesting part of this, 23% of all of those emissions come from just 3 materials: concrete, steel, and aluminum. These are major impactful materials because of how much heat is required for their processing to mold and form into what we use in our world. Major kicker to all of this is that our floor area ratio is expected to double by 2060. So if that holds true, we are going to blow through the roof of the resources that we need, the energy we need, and it's really going to start impacting what we're using. So hopefully we can try to reduce some of that, and we can bend our world so that if this does come, we're adaptable, we're resilient, we can make it happen without too much of an impact to our day-to-day lives. So how do we do this? I did this one way through life cycle assessments. Said a little bit at the beginning, so it allows us to quantify interactions between humans and the environment. We are super fortunate that the Haley family gave Paige and I both grants for an EcoInvent database that Western also helped out in purchasing. So hopefully you can use that for these projects, but also further projects down the line as we develop this, this whole LCA system. We use OpenLCA, which is an open source software. Little hard to figure out, but very versatile. A little bit of life cycle assessments. There's a number of different impact categories that you can assess through these. All have different impacts on the environment. I focused on global warming, CO2 equivalent emissions, because that's where the majority of the data is available through for building materials. So let's look at a life cycle stage graph. Starting out with the product phase, this is where materials come from, A1 to A3, everything that it takes to extract a material from the ground, get it to a manufacturing facility, mold it, do whatever it is, however complex it is, and then let it sit on the loading dock so that it can be ready to transport to a site. A lot of this data I got through environmental product declarations. EPDs are like mini LCA studies from each manufacturing facility. And so with these, you can use them as building blocks to build into larger systems. There's a lot of money in the Inflation Reduction Act for development of these, because this was one challenge, is finding EPDs for all the materials, especially some of the more high performance, harder to find materials that some of the habitat houses were using later on. The transportation to the site, I really wanted to try to quantify this a little bit more. Went and got a walk around the yard at Western Lumber with Chris there. He was super awesome. And we just looked at materials, the wood, the rebar, the insulation. And he talked about the supply chain. They don't really know what they get, when, where it's from, how it got there. It all kind of depends on economics and supply, so they can keep their yard stocked. And then how does it get there? If it goes on rail for a little while and then it gets on a truck, or if something is smaller and lighter, it comes from an airplane from somewhere, or large and slow, it can come on a freighter from Europe or wherever that country is from. So there's just so many uncertainties in this transportation aspect that I ended up eliminating it from this study. But it does, other studies have shown that it only accounts for about 5% of the total impact for a life cycle assessment. I did some installation of the A5 side of things, energy that it takes to construct the building once all the materials are there on site. And I also incorporated workers traveling to and from the site, which is a little unusual for LCAs, but a neat impact in the future. And then the operational energy, the B7, everything that either comes from the grid, electricity, natural gas, solar on site, those impacts that are needed to just run the building. So how do we do this? We have a goal and scope out of every LCA. This is the Willis Way block. These are the 5 homes that I studied. They are different sizes. These 2 ones, the most recent ones, are about 33% larger than the previous 3 ones. And so how do you compare those based on the quantities of materials? And so what I did is I broke it down per square footage, so it kind of normalizes the size of each of the homes. I did also have to exclude mechanical systems, electrical systems, plumbing systems, appliances. There's a lot of things that are very complex that there's not a lot of good information about how they're created and the impact that it takes to do that. So I really just focused on the building materials and the energy associated with these buildings. I had floor plans associated with each building, and so I created a spreadsheet that easily allows me to input the dimensions of the home and spits out a bill of materials of the quantities of each material. And then we have energy monitors on each of the homes, so I can quantify each load based on whether it's heating or cooling or lights and stuff like that. This is a breakdown of all those houses. We won't go into that too long. So I had to create a flow chart of how it goes. I modeled this off of the BEAM tool, which is a Builders for Climate Action model, which breaks into really cool how you can see different sections of the house. And then there's the construction and use phase side. So this is the model that I created through OpenLCA. On the left is all of the materials. They get split up into different things. I know this is blurry. One of the drawbacks is OpenLCA doesn't export images very well. This is a close-up of those same stages. You can see materials on the left, how it goes through. So I have one model that built everything into it, quantities for homes. If it had that number. If it didn't, it was 0. And so we spit out something that looks like this, where it either breaks up into the impact of those individual materials or based on the sections that I created, so we can really pinpoint where those impacts are and try to have more of a targeted approach to reduce them. So focusing on the construction results of just the materials, the first thing I really learned was that PV is a pretty large impact. It can potentially double the impact of the materials associated with constructing a house. So I split the model apart into 2 separate models so I could focus more on just the materials. Concrete is about 20 to 30% of each of these buildings. These are small buildings. They only have stem wall foundations. It could be very different for larger homes with concrete basements or other monolithic slab. Metal roofs, again, metal, one of those 3 major components, has about 5 times more impact than an asphalt shingle roof. Then you make this comparison, well, how many asphalt shingle roofs could you replace in the timeline of a metal roof? And so there's more digging deep you got to do there. Also a bonus, metal roofs get to be recycled at the end of their lifetime. Biogenic storage, so these 3 homes on the end utilize dense packed cellulose, which is a way to store carbon from the atmosphere. Instead of letting it rot in a landfill. And so this is instead of spending a lot of technology for carbon capture, this is a super easy way to mitigate the impacts of those materials because it can offset other types of insulation. Spray foam can be 2 to 20% more impactful based on the blowing agents that's used. So really trying to figure out if it's necessary, how to minimize it. It's great for certain things, but it also is very impactful. So just being aware of that. Glass is very, has a large impact, but can be used beneficially in a solar passive kind of aspect on the right faces. Just something to be aware of. These homes do a pretty good job of keeping, minimizing glass. Size of the home matters. These are all relatively small, but you can see on, when you break it down per square footage, this is actually the most highly performance energy efficient home. But when you break it down to square footage, the little larger home actually has less impact per square foot. I feel it'd be interesting to study larger homes, like around the 2,000 to 5,000 square foot range, to see if that curve changes back at some point. And then transportation is significant. So all of these red, orangey colors are what it takes to construct the home. Only about 5 to 10% of that is from the electricity to construct it. The rest is just transporting workers to and from the site. And these are all volunteers too. So we looked at the energy use intensity, the EUI. A study by Gunnison in 2020 on their climate action report has a few different baselines for different things. I could spend an hour on this graph talking about it. But some big things to see when you compare these homes. This is a natural gas home on the first. The rest are all electric. These 2 homes are pretty similar. And so something's wrong with the natural gas of this home. This should only be about 10% higher based on the boiler efficiency. So whether the boiler's not tuned right or there's major air leakage or something, a comparison like this shows where you can try to find and minimize those impacts. Also, this direct hot water heater out of this third house looks like it's only running on resistance heat because that should be a lot closer to 2 or 4, depending on closer to the other homes, similar ones. And then it raises the question, how many people live in the home, right? So this home only has 2 people living in it. This has 3, this has 2, this has 3. This one actually has 5 people living in this home. So denser homes can really reduce the amount of impact per person because you're sharing all of those materials and those environmental impacts together. Some key takeaways. This is a 50-year impact for everything based on a square footage. Operational energy is huge. You can see most of this energy comes from Gunnison Electric. But when you incorporate the solar, this house actually produces more energy than it is required. So it has a net impact. But as our grid gets greener with other solar or other renewable energies, this number is going to come down and the material impact is going to become a much higher percentage of that total homes life cycle assessment. Material choices matter. Really being aware of what materials you choose, where to do it during the design phases can have a major impact. These material choices, the upfront embodied carbon side of things, are locked in from the beginning. We can reduce the operational impacts later on by putting solar on later or changing systems to make the homes more efficient. Once we choose and build a home, that storage is just locked in there. We can't change that later on. So being aware of design makes the whole thing. Carbon storage, we should try to use this as much as we can. It's a really easy way to just minimize the impacts of homes. Overall, reducing what we need, just being aware of what electricity is, how it's interacted, what it takes to plug your computer in, what it takes to heat and cool a home. Just having more awareness overall, I think, is a really important thing to understand first, and then we can figure out ways to mitigate it. And become aware, ask questions. This is something that I don't hear a lot of the construction industry talking about. On a larger scale, it is becoming more prominent, but not so much in this valley right now. And so we really need to just think about that. I know we still have economics that we have to balance. You're not always going to be able to choose the most energy efficient, greenest, best material, but we need to at least have that in our comparisons. We can't keep focusing all of our decisions just on the economics. There are other things that we need to consider going forward. So with that, I'm out of time. I have a lot of people to thank, but thanks so much. Especially Julie, Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity. Thanks so much for your support. And all of those families that live there who are so cool, helping me just ask questions and let me poke around your house. Thanks so much to all of them. REG, great people. Butch Clark and the Haley family, all the support from there. Nunatak and Equitable Solar Solutions for helping get solar on the homes. Great. Western, everyone else. And my community cohort, thanks so much for making this program probably a lot more fun than it should have been. So thanks a lot.
And next, Ali Kostick. Oh, we have a question. Sorry. Yes.
Did you submit it on the Slido?
Yeah. Okay, let's begin with the Slido. And Donny, why isn't there much data available to measure the other impacts that were beyond your scope? Will there be more soon in the future?
How do I measure the things that I didn't take into account that I had to exclude? Or why is there not information there? It's kind of a new industry. Life cycle assessment's been around since the 80s. But really, the last 10 years, people have focused a lot on the operational impact of things, but not the embodied energy and embodied carbon required to construct these materials. So once we kind of started reducing our impact, we started changing focus on other materials. So coming up, appliances, other systems will be more kind of calculable in the future. It's just, we need people to do it.
Okay, and one more. How reliable is the data you were using for individual materials for your LCAs? Can you explain where it comes from and who makes it available?
Yes, I can, but whoever's had that question should sit down with me because that's going to take 4 hours to do. So I'm not going to lie.
And mainly the EcoInvent database.
Yeah, EcoInvent was a good database for a lot of things. Unfortunately, they didn't have a lot of the construction materials. And so if I had a material specific to the house, a lot of the insulation is quantified through EPDs. I had to make some kind of assumptions, but most of the materials are pretty good in there and the quantities are pretty accurate.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will have more time for questions for the whole panel. Yeah, and then Ali Kostick, welcome for your panel presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aleksandra Kostick, and I'm going to be presenting to you on sustainable building construction, affordability, and resilient community advancement in partnership and collaboration with Veterans Off Grid, the nonprofit I worked with. So I'm just going to go over a little outline first. I'm just going to go over project progression, how I got here, introduction to veterans off-grid, the nonprofit I worked with, and what it means to live sustainably off-grid. And then I'll go over a little summary of some of the building varieties, the green buildings, and some sustainable agriculture efforts. And then I will touch on an alternative construction technology course that I was able to not only participate in, but also do some mixed method research. And finally, I'm going to talk about some preliminary work that I did for a training program based at Veterans Off-Grid. So it all started in the fall of 2022 when I received a fellowship grant to do the Earthship Biotecture Academy. And Earthship Biotecture is located in Taos, New Mexico, where I live. And it is based on 6 principles. The first is thermal heating and cooling, building with natural and repurposed materials. You can see there's some tires up on the top right, and also some aluminum cans that they use for wall art. And the third is water harvesting, storage and filtration systems, contained sewage, solar and wind electrical energy, and food production. And so you can see here, this is the world's largest legal off-grid subdivision. And this is where the Earthship is located. It's called the Greater World Community. It was founded in 1998. And it is around 630 acres with around 130 plots for homes. And so what this really got me thinking of, what does it mean to live off-grid sufficiently, have a sufficient home, but be in a subdivision. So, there's no shared resources or communal spaces in this subdivision. And there's a lot of fragmentation, obviously, between the plots without remediation or regeneration. And so this led me to Veterans Off-Grid. And Ryan, who started Veterans Off-Grid, was actually an alumni of the Earthship Academy, and that kind of inspired him to create his off-grid community. And so I was referenced to him. And it began in 2017 when Ryan purchased 50 acres in Carson, New Mexico, with the mission of tackling homelessness for veterans by teaching and building sustainable off-grid homes and having projects that really focus on housing and food security. And a little background on him, he served in the U.S. Army as an intelligence analyst and psychological operations specialist. He served multiple tours in Afghanistan, both as a soldier and a contractor. And when he came back, he really was like, I want to create a space where I can restore purpose, community, and peace to veterans in need. And since 2017, he's had 47 veterans stay on the property, 37 civilians, thousands of volunteers. And so this really got me thinking, it's learning more than it's just the building and how efficient and sustainable that building is, but more about the larger encompassing environment and landscape. And so he really showed me that there are endless possibilities that occur when one regenerates the landscape surrounding the buildings. And so really talking like self-sufficient building versus what's a self-sufficient community. And so these are all elements of Veterans Off-Grid. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to go over health and spiritual well-being, which is really important. Providing housing stability and mental health service navigation. Veterans Off-Grid partnered with Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education and the VA to create, together with veterans, rural suicide prevention in Taos County. In addition, they partnered with Veterans Upward Bound, Not Forgotten Outreach, and Heart of Taos to create the Taos Collaborative for Housing, which is really great. And next, I'm just going to get into some of the buildings. So on the left here, you see it's called the Nest. It's a hyper adobe design, and the right is a super adobe design. So what's the difference? They're both natural style buildings, and really the difference is the earth bag that is used to create the foundation for the house. And for the hyper adobe, they use lemon bags, and so they create the adobe mix and they pull the adobe monolithically around the perimeter of the house through the lemon bag, and then they end up tamping it down to create rigidity. And so they had 2 feet of earth bag foundation plus adobe flooring in that one. and it's quite small. That one's like 88 square feet in the interior. And there is a veteran living in there actually now, Richard. But what was really cool about this one is that instead of using mined sand as the binding ingredient for the mix, he actually decided to use recycled pieces of glass bottles on his property and really like smash them down until it became like small particles of essentially sand, but glass. And so as the lime plaster on the outside kind of wears down, you can see these sparkles in the day, which is very cool. And the difference with the super adobe is really just the type of earth bag. So this is a little bit bigger. It's 120 square feet in the interior. But the earth bag that's used for here are rice bags. And I don't know if you've like seen rice bags before, but they're quite slippery. And so actually this becomes a little bit more costly because you need to have barbed wire between the earth bag layers to create that rigid structure. Okay, and now moving on to the Wallapini. This is an underground greenhouse. It's 4 seasons. And a Wallapini actually derives from Aymara native language of Bolivia and Peru, and it means place of warmth. So this is 900 square feet. It's dug 4.5 feet deep, and this is to utilize the Earth's natural temperature of 50 to 60 degrees. So using that thermal mass to heat and cool the structure. It is made from adobe earth bags as well. And there's a rain catchment system that is on the outside in the cistern, and gravity feeds that down into the Wallapini. But also what's in the Wallapini, as you can see on the top left, your left, there is like a gray water nutrient dense solution. And so this is for the aeroponic system. So all of these little like tubes that you see, there's 32 3D printed PVC pipes with 12 ports. And those hold the root balls of the lettuce. And it's intermittently, this nutrient dense solution is sprayed every 12 minutes. It trickles down to feed all of the 12 ports and then is recycled back in to the system. And this is very surprising. They do, it's about like 50 heads of lettuce a week. He runs a microgreen business for the local Taos area, restaurants, food co-ops, things like that. This structure uses 12 to 60 gallons a day. So that's very impressive. And in comparison, quickly going through this is just the hoop house. It's a 2-season greenhouse, and it uses 600 gallons a day. So quite different. Getting into the last one, this is the healing space. It initially started as kind of a pole barn structure, and it was really not resistant to wind, and it was kind of catered towards volunteers in the spring, summer, and fall. And so what's special about this place is they ended up creating it to be a community space. It's 360 square feet in the interior. And as you can see on the top left, that's me doing some slip straw, which is light straw clay. It's used for insulation, and it's basically a mixture of clay, water, and sediment lightly coated on the straw and then used for insulation. And this was mostly entirely built in the summer of 2023 by the Alternative Construction Technology course, which I'll get into. But what do all these things have in common? I just want to point out community, cooperation, collaboration, innovation, educational outreach. So I was able to not only participate in this course, it was the first ever hands-on week-long intensive course that was at Veterans Off-Grid, partnered with UNM Taos Construction Technology Program. It was completely funded by Chevron, 4 credited hours. You got an OSHA certification training, OSHA 10 for construction safety, and it was a really great turnout. So I was able to do a preliminary survey, and then I ended up taking those results, tokenizing them, and coding them in RStudio, and creating some graphics. And this is just quickly going through these. You can just see, it's all the way from under 18 to over 55. There were 20 people in this program. Veterans to not veterans, we had like 4 or 5 veterans participate, which is really fun. And then we had, this is the highest degree of education, you can't really see, but less than a high school diploma all the way to a master's degree, really cool. Why did you decide to choose working in a 6-day intensive course rather than a semester-long course? What were the deciding factors? Mostly fits into the schedule, couldn't commit to a full semester. And also really interesting, this experiential learning was really conducive to this content. It was a bottom-up build, so it was really cool to see everyone get in there. And then this is just employment status and reasoning for why you chose the course. We had exploring career pathways, interest in building own home, and interest in sustainable living and building. And then, after doing both the Yearship Academy and also this course and collecting data, I was able to create a sample curriculum training in sustainable construction technology, focusing on green building, affordability, and sustainable living. And as you can see, it's a pretty holistic, there's a lot of different factors when thinking about sustainable construction. The final project is a 3D model of a desired home by the student. So that is really cool. And I just want to end by saying that working for this nonprofit has been an incredible experience. I've had so much autonomy in, what I want to learn, who I want to meet. I've been connected really well to the community, and there's so many opportunities for students to come and learn. They just installed a biochar site. They do compost, tons of permaculture. They need help with their microgreen business, endless opportunities. So I just want to end. And yeah, I have a lot of people to thank. I really want to thank Ryan, my community sponsor, for really taking me under his wing. And, I learned so much from him, as well as the residents of Veterans Off Grid. Y'all are great. Mark Goldman, the coordinator of the UNM Taos Construction Tech Department, huge mentor to me. Really awesome to meet him. Earthship Biotexture, that was awesome. And also Western Colorado, my mentor, Karen, you're awesome. Thank you for your patience. Ricardo, Micah, thank you for your support. I had some alumni, Chase Cordova and Claire Lancer. They helped me a lot in the beginning of my time. Tim Andrews for the art studio support, and a large group of people from Taos who also supported me, as well as my fellowship fund and my opportunity to study in Germany this year through Erasmus exchange. Thank you so much.
Great job, Ali. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we have a first question here saying what is a lemon bag?
Okay, it's a Rochelle. Is that how you say it? Rochelle. It's like that type of it's like at the grocery store. It's hard to explain, but it's kind of what they usually keep lemon and limes in, and it's sort of looks like fish wire almost, like it's like fishnet kind of. That's what that is. Yeah.
Okay, and then we will have more questions for the panel.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank
How
you.
about
Given
Paige?
Next is Paige Kempker.
How are we doing, everyone? Good? Great. Okay, well, my name is Paige. I am a master's in environmental management graduate student studying in the Sustainable and Resilient Communities track. And I partnered with the town of Mountain Village to do a recycling infrastructure audit and a waste reduction campaign. So just to get us grounded a little bit, the town of Mountain Village is a very small town located in San Miguel County. If you haven't heard of Mountain Village, you've probably heard of Telluride. It is the Telluride ski base, short 14-minute gondola ride away. And this project aims to tackle some of their climate action goals, namely their net zero waste by 2025 and net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So my project can be split up into 3 different phases. The first phase is a definition phase where I visited the town of Mountain Village. I spent 2 weeks there to really dive in, get to know the community, and kind of establish where we're at with recycling and waste reduction in the community. Phase 2 was when I took everything that I learned from phase 1 and really dove deeper into some of those things that I found through some further quantitative life cycle assessment, as well as further collaboration with the town and their waste haulers. And then phase 3 is where I again took everything that I learned from phase 1 and phase 2 and leaned into some community outreach and then planned ahead for the future of waste reduction in the community. So phase 1, like I said, I spent 2 weeks in the town of Mountain Village in October to perform a recycling infrastructure audit. So I went around to all of, well, not all of, but a lot of commercial and retail locations. I talked to about 40 people, ranging from business owners to just retail staff to regular community members, to really get to understand recycling operations in the town and get some answer any questions that they might have about recycling in the town. So and then really discuss some barriers to recycling at each of these locations. So obviously answers varied by person to person, by location, but a very consistent answer that I got from almost every single person that I talked to, remember I talked to like 40 people, was what happens to our recycling? We don't even know what happens to our recycling when it leaves Mountain Village. So the next, this is an interesting thing about recycling in Mountain Village. Just one of the unique things that I learned is when we built the town of Mountain Village, nobody considered the waste stream and how we were going to get the waste out of some of the areas in the community. So a lot of these places and like the collection bins are not even accessible by those big trucks. So what they have to do is take an electric golf cart into the village core and haul those big collection bins to an accessible collection bin for the actual waste haulers. So just one of the many very unique situations with the waste stream in Mountain Village. But we were able to take all of those questions, comments, concerns that I learned from talking to all of those community members, and I took them directly to those waste haulers. So in the second week of visiting the town, myself and one of my community sponsors, JD Wise, we visited the recovery facilities, which are the sorting facilities. You will also maybe hear me call them MRFs. The waste management in Grand Junction facility, as well as the Bruin Waste Management facility in Montrose. So we were able to take all of those questions directly to the waste haulers, get those questions answered by the waste haulers, and then really get an understanding of the sorting process and operations and how they run their operations there. So these are some pictures. These are about as glamorous as waste management photos can possibly get. These images might not look that great to you guys, but to me, this is beautiful. These are all of our plastics, numbers 1, plastics numbers 2, and you can tell that there's really no cross-contamination that I can see. They are very good at sorting appropriately. This is all their aluminum. We were super impressed with the waste management facility in Grand Junction. So for phase 2, again, this is my further investigation and collaboration. So once we left the materials recovery facilities, it was time to get the community those answers. So I put together one of my main deliverables for the town of Mountain Village was an ArcGIS story map. Linked on this QR code here if you want to take a look at it. And that story map was able to display and track the entire process of recycling from disposal in Mountain Village all the way to the materials for recovery at their final MRFs, and even provided some information for recycling markets and what happens to those products or to those materials and what types of products they might get turned into. So really providing that community with the transparency of this process that almost all of them were looking for when I spoke with them. And I was also able to, in order to further disperse that information, I put together a blog post and a newsletter with some of the information from that story map, but also linking that story map to really get it out there. And then I'm also going to be working with Mountain Village to get some little stickers with this QR code on there to even further disperse this deliverable that I had for them. And then, so the LCA that I decided to run for this project, I did my life cycle assessment on the sorting process of waste management and then brew and waste pre and post 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. So the COVID-19 global pandemic disrupted supply chains all over the world, and brew and waste was no exception to the flashback from the global pandemic. So unfortunately, in the early 2020, they had to shut down recycling operations completely. So for a couple of months, they were unable to staff their facility, and therefore they were unable to recycle anything coming out of Mountain Village through brew and waste. Well, a few months later, they were able to get back to recycling, which was great. That's really what we needed. But it was not by being able to restaff the Montrose facility. They still struggle today with staffing the Montrose facility, but they were able to put in a system in place to outsource that sorting. So instead of sorting at the Montrose facility, they now send about 10% of the materials that are picked up by Bruin to the Grand Junction MRF with waste management that we also visited. But about 90% of it, they send all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah, to Rocky Mountain Recycling Services. Now, me being a systems thinker, it's so great that we were able to get back to recycling, but that travel distance it increased so much. So I really wanted to quantify the difference in carbon emissions to hopefully get a fire under our belly and really try to get back to local sorting. So I performed a life cycle assessment, not quite as complex as Donny's, but really comparing the transportation and the electricity usage at each of these MRFs, as well as the treatment of municipal solid waste, any contamination that they had. So in that assessment, I found that the brew and waste post 2020 operations are almost exactly 3 times the amount of carbon emissions as their pre-2020 operations. So I don't know what exact number I was expecting to see, but that was far more drastic than I anticipated. So that was really beneficial for the town to get an understanding of how much more impactful the post-2020 operations are now. And then the final bit of my quantitative assessment was just a further investigation of my own curiosities of their waste stream data. Note that I was limited to only 3 years of brew and waste data because this is the only data that we have that uses the best practices that Bruin uses now. So it's really difficult to get waste stream data. There's a lot of estimation that goes into that. But yeah, so just looking at some of the trends, we can see that there's a spike every August. There's a peak every August. There's a valley around September, November, and just really kind of diving into what could potentially be causing those issues. And so phase 3 of my project was the community outreach and education. So I was able to take, again, everything that I learned in phase 1 and phase 2 and turned it into about 10 social media posts that I created for the town of Mountain Village and created a schedule to be posted in the future. These were a mix of posts. So some of them were unique to times of year, but really applying all of that information that I learned in the first two phases, namely, so for example, those peaks in August, I have a post for them to send out in August, like a back to school waste reduction. And then there's other ones that are less unique to time of year that they can post whenever they see fit, namely things like rumors about contamination ruining a whole bin. Contamination does not ruin the whole bin. But yeah, so planned out some future posts to really continue this education and outreach, because unfortunately, things when it comes to recycling and waste reduction, education and outreach isn't something that you can ever stop. It has to keep going consistently in order for it to be effective. I also developed a few infographics targeted at residents and tourists. So like I said in the beginning, Telluride or Mountain Village is the Telluride ski base. So we see a lot of influx of tourists. And as you can imagine, it's really difficult for people that don't live in a certain area to really understand how we do things around here. So targeting at residents and tourists, and then also translating those into English and Spanish, as well as my GIS story map was also translated into Spanish. And that is to aid in accessibility, as the town of Mountain Village has about 18% native Spanish speakers. And then finally, I made some recommendations for the future and put together a future plan for the town of Mountain Village. Some of my future recommendations include, but are not limited to, contracting the haulers to include reporting. Right now, our reporting is very limited. Okay, we also need to return to local sorting ASAP, be consistent with outreach, and then comprise a new zero waste action plan. I also just wanted to plug some future MEM projects. If you're not interested in continuing with zero waste, the town of Mountain Village is really looking for new MEM projects. I am the first MEM student that they ever partnered with, and they're really looking to continue that in the future. We've got community composting, building energy, greenhouse gas inventory, all of that. If you're interested, please reach out to my community sponsors. Their emails are up there. And lastly, I just want to thank everybody so much that has helped me with this project. First and foremost, I want to thank my funders, the town of Mountain Village, for providing me with a generous stipend and covering all of my travel costs to visit for the 2 weeks. Margie and John Haley for providing me with funding for the EcoInvent database. Lauren and JD, my community sponsors, I hope you're watching. My mentor, Dr. Ricardo, he has helped me with so much. He's helped me with LCA trainings and all of my Spanish translations and linking me up with the town of Mountain Village in the first place. Other Mountain Village town staff, LT, Michelle Haynes, Catherine Warren, all of my waste hauler representatives. I want to thank Kendra's quantitative methods class for helping me sift through that EcoInvent database and pulling the materials that I really needed. Green Delta staff, again, for helping with LCA. We needed a lot of help with LCA. And also my friends and family for being so supportive through my entire academic journey, the roller coaster of an academic journey. And just all the other Mountain Village community members that took the time to talk to me, didn't look at me too weird for asking to see their trash.
Well done, Paige.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Yes.
I think I don't have time for questions.
I think we can start the panel for all.
That's what
And then I will give you the questions that are, and we can start with you, I would say.
Okay.
Yes. So let me have you, Paige. Mountain Village is an affluent community. Did you find that the community has a lot of capacity, monetary capacity, that they want to spend towards these waste goals?
Yeah, I would say that in my experience with working with them, the monetary capacity isn't necessarily the limitation. It's more of the capacity of the town staff and what they have the ability to do. One of my sponsors, Lauren Kern, is also the grant specialist for the town. So that's another way they get a lot of their funding.
Great. And the next question is for Ali. Ali, can you speak to the legality of green building methods? Does Carson, New Mexico have unique regulations that allows these structures to be built?
Yeah. The first part was just about, sorry, can you repeat the first part?
Yes. Can you speak to the legality of green building methods?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so especially talking about earthships too, that was probably like 40 years of lobbying to try to like be up to code and use, they use tires for their foundation. There's a lot of things that are different. But I think in Taos and Carson, New Mexico, natural building is huge. And there's a lot of really cool, innovative methods that actually are approved by the county. But yeah, in terms of like international building codes and residential building codes, I'm not like super and like know a ton about them, but I do know that also, the greater rural community is a subdivision and it's legal, all of that. Veterans Off Grid is legal, but it's a community. So it's not subdivided. There's a limit to how many buildings they can really build on that property. And, at the time he's applying and trying to work on a special use permit for their buildings. And
Excellent. Thank you. And the next question is for Donny. What are the biggest roadblocks to improving the sustainability of construction in this valley?
I think some major things are getting people to understand how much of an impact they have, especially on the larger homes, and trying to find a balance between maybe you can't always design and build a house exactly how you want it because of the environmental impact. And so people are going to have to sacrifice something somewhere to make them more environmentally friendly. It's an unfortunate situation, but there are better materials. I think just bringing awareness, hopefully the contractors start talking about it. I feel like homeowners don't really understand this side of things, and they put their trust in a contractor or architect to do that work for them. And too often that architect just kind of runs them through the ringer and pushes through what they know with their recipe and don't take the time to help really the owners with their goals.
Thank you. And for Paige, with a goal of net zero by 2050, are the golf carts that collect trash currently electric, or is the plan to make that switch?
No, they are currently electric, which is really cool. And we're revisiting the greenhouse gas inventory as well, and those are going to be incorporated into that.
Thank you. And for Ali, another question. Have any veterans built homes in other states or locations based on what they learned with Veterans of Grid?
yeah, I think that is definitely a part of Ryan's like whole mission is he'd really like for it to be kind of like that effect where, a veteran will learn all these like hard skills and job training and then be able to, have a career, but also have the autonomy to build their own home. And most of the veterans as of now, that I know of, have built all of the homes that they live in on the property. And they have gone off and gotten jobs and done really cool things. But as far as, his future plans, he would love to have, different veterans off grid plots and all over the US. So people can, he talks a lot about how as veterans, like it's really hard, like you're kind of always on the go, like trying to kind of settle and like figure out your purpose, your mission. And so the concept of having them, all over the US is so, you can explore, oh, is this kind of, do I feel at home here? Or do I feel like I like the community in Texas more? Or do I like the community in California more? But yeah, just spreading that knowledge. But yeah.
Thank you. And for Donny, how difficult is it to track all the materials, brands, brand products, numbers, etc., used in building a new home? can you track materials in retrofitted homes?
It is difficult, but definitely not impossible. Any material that you can acquire, if it doesn't have an environmental product declaration yet, I'm guessing that it will in the next 5 to 10 years, because that's the way the industry and funding is going, that people just want to know what that impact is. And so if you have that number for each that material, builders automatically have a bill of materials that they need to purchase from the building supply store or wherever they get it. And so really just summing all those up together gives you the impact for either a new home or retrofits, remodels of existing homes.
Thank you. And for Paige, are there seasonal occupancy differences between Mountain Village and other places like Gunnison or Montrose? And how do differences impact waste streams and carbon footprints?
Yes, they range seasonally, pretty dramatically actually, because there's a point of the year where the village center is pretty much shut down because it's all frozen over. And then but in that time, we also have an influx of tourists for ski season. Yeah, so there's on and off seasons, and that definitely impacts especially the retail and commercial locations. They just sell a lot more during that time. So obviously there's a large influx in waste. Mostly for the commercial locations, though, it's mostly plastic film and cardboard. So recyclable materials.
Thank you. And for all is the last question. What drew you to your project, and what opportunities do you see for future students to expand on your work?
I had a little slide about this, but yeah, I would love to see them develop a new zero waste action plan. As you can probably imagine, we're not going to meet that 2025 goal, but that is not unique to Mountain Village. There's one town in the entire world that is even close to zero waste. It's Kamakatsu, Japan, and they're only at about 85% diversion from the landfill. So just revisiting that goal with more realistic checkpoints that add up to the overall goal.
So I've considered the open LCA model that I've built as kind of an infancy stage. With all the assumptions and things I had to exempt from it, there's a lot of opportunity to continue building that. And as more and more materials get detailed, it'll just be a lot easier to do that. And so finding either students or other industry people who are interested in that to provide support, I think is super important. And just having this conversation is important, like something we don't do very often. I think more of that is better.
Yeah. Like I mentioned in my slides as well, this is the first year that someone's worked with Veterans Off Grid. And I had an incredible time working with them and have learned a lot. And it's just really cool to see the autonomy that a student can have, at a small nonprofit to make an impact or to really learn as much as they can. But again, going off of that, there's a ton of efforts in sustainable agriculture, landscape design, and just learning about natural buildings as well. If you want to learn more about permitting stuff and, building code stuff, you can do that. But the syllabus or the curriculum that I created with Ryan and Mark Goldman at UNM Taos is really trying to formulate a good partnership potentially with Western, and having a student kind of either, make this training program really hit it off the ground, or just go in and really just make the most of what opportunities he has on his property. But definitely plenty of things you can do for Veterans Off Grid. So.
Thank you, and congratulations for the three. And let's give an applause for them. And then we have a break, and we will be back at 11:10 to continue. Thank you.